Hi again, magic lovers. Tracy Partridge-Johnson here with another reading from Book 1, The Golden Telescope, in my Jack and the Magic Hat Maker series. I hope you're doing well since our last reading, getting ready for Christmas or whatever other holidays you might be celebrating. At our house, we haven't even taken the time or had the chance to put up our Christmas tree yet, so I'll be doing that this weekend. But I hope that you all are having fun decorating and getting ready, doing your baking and all of that fun stuff. I can hardly wait to dig into doing that myself. But for now, let's dig into the story. Last time, we ended in chapter 20. And when we closed off the chapter, Bart was in the den with his dad, Bill, in their house in Portland, Oregon. And Bill had just performed a locator spell to find out where Jack is and who he's with. And we discovered that Jack is currently in Macpayden Manor in Dublin, Ireland, and he's with Arthur Loyal. So that was a fun development. Let's move along now to chapter 21. Auntie Inez. Stockholm, Sweden, 2 years prior. Desmond detested appearing as a lowly chauffeur, but he was content to play that role if the act ingratiated him a little further with his nieces. Inez in particular. There he stood, amidst a lineup of other drivers holding placards, sifting through the chaos of new arrivals, watching for their designated passengers. His sign read, Ethan Macpayden. The boy wasn't hard to pick out from the crowd. He carried himself with a sense of authority and entitlement that was immediately obvious. Ethan strode through the masses of humanity as though he was alone in the airport terminal, not caring who might stray into his path. But that wasn't what made him stand apart. His hair was abundant, glossy, and raven black. It hung in loose curls, nearly to his shoulders. It starkly contrasted against his alabaster jawline. But those eyes were the source of his real power. Desmond had never seen such a brilliant shade of sapphire blue. Long, dark lashes fringed them. For sure, those eyes could pierce a person's soul. The boy was flanked, on either side, by Thaddeus and Astrid O'Brien, each struggling with bags and purses, while Ethan only appeared to be carrying his phone. "Ah, Radcliffe!" Thaddeus exclaimed, having made eye contact with their driver. "Good to see you, my man." "Yes, Thaddeus, Astrid, so good to see you again." He leaned over to peck Astrid on the cheek. "And this must be—" Desmond turned to face the teenager. "Ethan," Astrid offered, then turned to the boy. "Yes, Ethan, this is our dear family friend, Desmond Radcliffe." The boy glanced toward the man, slowly looked him over from head to toe and back, before replying. "And what's his super special magical ability?" His gaze came to a halt when he reached Desmond's eyes, and he stared intently, without blinking, waiting for a response. "Yes, well," Desmond cleared his throat, uncomfortable under the boy's unwavering gaze. "We'll talk about all of that later." He shifted toward Thaddeus. "Did you check any bags, or shall we be on our way?" "No other bags, Des. Where are you parked?" Desmond nodded and turned toward the exit, motioning for the others to follow. Arlanda Airport was a 30-minute drive from the Macpayden sisters' villa, located in Ostermom, a fashionable residential neighborhood in central Stockholm. Home to the rich, famous, and downright beautiful, Ostermom is Stockholm's well-heeled party hotspot. But more significant for the sisters' purposes, the property was central to the halls of Swedish power and government. Close to the Grand Church and situated only a stone's throw from the royal castle, this location offered them access to those in positions capable of influencing not only local, but world affairs. Desmond unlocked the front door and ushered them into the main entrance of the home, sneaking a glance in Ethan's direction. The boy's expression betrayed his cool demeanor, and Desmond smirked in return, knowing even a boy as arrogant as this would be impressed by the home's opulence. "Ethan!" Clara exclaimed, bouncing down the stairs with unexpected exuberance. "Oh, I'm so excited to meet you, sweet nephew." Clara McPain possessed an unrestrained enthusiasm that could be unnerving if you weren't prepared for it. She wrapped her arms around Ethan unreservedly, drawing him close. Ethan, visibly put off, did not return her embrace, but rather stood there, arms to his sides, with a slightly confused look on his face. Clara didn't seem to notice. She pulled away and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Oh, let me look at you. Yes, yes, you have your father's eyes," she said, looking at him. "And that hair!" She didn't wait for permission, shoving both hands through his silken locks and extending them out away from his head. "Oh my gosh, aren't you just the cutest thing ever?" she said, beaming brightly before finally seeming to register the discomfort on the teenager's face. Her smile diminished slightly, and she stepped away, simply proffering a hand instead. "What am I thinking? How rude of me! I'm your Auntie Clara. How was your flight? You must be exhausted." She looked around, searching for something. Flamel, Flamel, come here and help our guests to their rooms." A middle-aged man with smooth, ash-colored hair appeared from another room. Dressed in dark coat and slacks with a white shirt, Flamel approached the new arrivals. He retrieved their bags, then graciously motioned toward the stairs. "Please, do follow me to your accommodations," he said, and he began ascending the flight. "You'll want to bathe and change your clothes before dinner," Clara said as they walked away. "Please do take your time and refresh yourselves. Auntie Inez will join us in the dining room at 6 p.m. She is so looking forward to meeting you, Ethan." At 6 p.m. sharp, Flamel stood just outside the entrance to the formal dining room, a small brass bell in his hand. He rang it succinctly 3 times, then set it on a small brass plate that was resting on a golden spruce stand. Earl, Astrid, and Ethan were descending the stairs when Clara stepped out of the dining room, wearing a blush peach ruched dress that complemented her fair skin and flowing red hair beautifully. She looked up expectantly toward them. "Excellent," she said. "Appetizers are just being served." The O'Briens dressed a little more casually. Thaddeus was in jeans and a black turtleneck. Astrid's blonde hair was pulled up in a French twist, and she was wearing a conservative, rose-colored cardigan with a simple string of pearls and cream-colored slacks. Ethan wore a pastel aqua zip-front sweater with a pair of faded denims. In the dining room, an oversized rectangular table capable of seating 12 filled the room. Flamel moved toward the head of the table and pulled out the second chair from the end. "Madam," he said, looking at Astrid, then motioning to the first seat next to hers. "Sir," he motioned toward Thaddeus. Clara was standing at the head of the table. "Ethan, you're the guest of honor this evening." She pulled the chair out and looked at him, waiting. The boy walked past his aunt and uncle, then, reaching Clara, looked at her with a smirk, then slid into the chair. Clara walked to the other side of the table and was preparing to sit down when Desmond entered the room. He was wearing a navy blue suit jacket, jeans, and a white button-down shirt with a multicolored silk neck scarf tucked into the open collar. His dark hair was slicked back away from his forehead, and the spicy fragrance of his cologne immediately filled the room. Ethan balked audibly, and Astrid glared in his direction disapprovingly. She was opening her mouth to say something when their host for the evening, Inez McPaden, entered the room. Each of the adults moved to stand when she spoke. "Oh, no, please, stay seated. We're all family here," she said reassuringly, as she sat down at the opposite end of the table from Ethan. This evening, Inez was dressed to set her guests at ease. In keeping with that objective, she wore her dark hair down, flowing in soft waves over her shoulders. She was wearing a billowy red blouse, the shade of which perfectly matched the color she chose for her lips, and she had on a simple pair of black slacks. She didn't spare any extravagance in her choice of jewelry, however. And though the gems on her hands, neck, and ears were simple in design, the diamonds were substantial. It was a glaring display of wealth. "Ethan, my dear nephew, it's such a pleasure to meet you at long last." Inez was gracious and welcoming. Turning to Thaddeus and Astrid, she continued, "Uncle, so nice to see you again. Aunt Astrid, it's been far too long. Welcome." They all nodded their thank yous in response. The servants began bringing in trays of food and filling goblets with beverages as the group made small talk. Ethan remained quiet, mostly observing, keeping his thoughts to himself. "Let me address the elephant in the room, if I may," Inez asserted, looking directly at Ethan. "I know you have many questions about who we are, why you're here, what we want from you, and about your grandfather, Ethan. I want to address some of those questions for you right now, if you don't mind." She was speaking to him as an equal with thoughtful consideration. Ethan appreciated this, sat to attention, meeting her eyes. "Yes, I'd appreciate that. Thank you." It was the first full sentence he'd spoken since they sat down to eat. "Wonderful. Rather than asking you about those questions, why don't I fill in some blanks for you, and then you may ask for clarification afterward?" She waited. "That sounds fine." His communication was curt, but he was willing to listen. "I understand you had a rather disturbing visitor who materialized into your bedroom recently. A man named Arthur, who claimed to be on a mission from your grandfather, Sir Edward. Is that correct?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "Right. I'm sure that was disconcerting for you." Inez looked to him for confirmation, and he nodded. "I also hear that he told you that you are in danger from us, that we have evil designs planned for you and your magical abilities?" Again she waited, and again he nodded, still silent. "I'd like to tell you the truth regarding his claims. First of all, he was telling you the truth about who he is. Arthur is my father's, your grandfather's, butler. He is an extremely devoted servant, and for good reason. Father has been very good to him all these years." Ethan was listening attentively. Arthur actually did most of the work of raising us. And your father, for the last several years that your Auntie Clara and I lived at our ancestral home, Macpayden Manor, on the outskirts of Dublin, Ireland. Wait a minute, Ethan interjected. Are you telling me he materialized in my bedroom that day, all the way from Ireland? That's exactly what I'm telling you. But we'll get into how Arthur did that a little later. Ethan crossed his arms, but didn't complain. What he didn't tell you is, well, rather a lot, to be frank. She took a sip of wine before continuing. I do realize that he was in a hurry, so didn't have much time to explain. And he likely would have told you more of his version of the story, given a chance. But what he did tell you was a distorted version of the truth. You see, my father does have incredible powers. And there was a time when those powers were beneficial to a lot of very important people. But that was a long time ago, before our mother, your grandmother, Lydia, went missing. Missing? Ethan interrupted her. What do you mean? This is one of the important facts Arthur conveniently left out of his story to you. Your grandfather Edward sent her on a mission, a magical mission of some kind. She paused for emphasis. And she never returned. He refused to tell any of us where he sent her or why it is that she didn't come back. In fact, he didn't know himself, and it consumed him. Yes, Clara interjected. So much so that he completely neglected us, his children, because he was so absorbed in his efforts to find her. That's right, sister, Inez said, and that compulsion drove him crazy. Literally insane. This is the reason Arthur took over caring for us, and is ultimately why Auntie Clara and I chose to leave our home and never return, she finished. What about my dad? You just left him alone there with wacky grandpa? Ethan asked. Why didn't you take him with you? Weren't you worried about his safety? Well, that was a tough choice for us to make, Inez replied. Your dad was only 12 years old at the time, so he wasn't really of an age where he could be out on his own in the world. And we weren't prepared to act as his parents. So we decided it would be best to leave your father in Arthur's capable and devoted care. Besides, Ross didn't want to leave father alone, so he stayed behind, she finished. So, are you saying that the reason Grandpa Edward thinks I'm in danger from you is that he's insane? Are you saying that you don't want to take advantage of my magical abilities? I can read your mind, you know, and I can tell you're holding something back. Ethan's eyes narrowed on his aunt across the table, and Inez's own eyes narrowed in response. She disliked being questioned, especially by some kid, but she tamed her inclination to snap back. After all, Ethan was not just any ordinary teen. Well, yes and no, she replied. Yes, I'm saying that the reason you're in danger from your grandfather is that he is insane. But there's more to it than that. He needs you to carry on in his footsteps after he is gone. That role would have gone to your father. But since your father is gone, and Grandfather Edward's gift is passed down through the male side of the bloodline, he feels that the job falls to you, as his first grandson. And what job is this that you're talking about? Ethan raised a skeptical eyebrow. that of the magic hat maker. Ethan laughed out loud. That's hilarious, he scoffed. Oh, it may sound silly, but you will be astonished when you learn about all the incredible power that comes with this position, Inez informed him. Power? Making hats? Ethan smirked. We'll get into all of the details surrounding that in due time, but for now, just know that Sir Edward does have ulterior motives for wanting Arthur to whisk you away to McPaden Manor, she said. Ethan paused, watching those around the table carefully, his eye flitting from one face to the next before finally landing back on Inez. You said yes and no. Inez raised her chin. No, I'm not saying that we don't want to take advantage of your magical abilities. Of course we do. It would be ludicrous for me to tell you otherwise. But here, with us, you will be among those who are like you. Clara and I also possess special magical abilities. We want to help you hone yours and learn better how to control and utilize them. You would be considered a valuable part of our team, rather than an outsider, a kind of freak in society. So we offer many benefits if you choose to work with us. As she finished, Flamel and a handful of other servants entered the dining room carrying trays piled high with food. Think about what I've said, Inez said over the clatter of plates and trays, and we can talk more tomorrow, Ethan. But know that we are here to help you, and we do feel that this could be a very mutually beneficial relationship. Now, she smiled sweetly, let's enjoy dinner, shall we? Chapter 22, Realization. I want to see if I've got enough time to read this to you. I think I can squeeze it in. Let's see what we can do. Dublin, Ireland, present day. Jack landed with a thud, losing his footing, and found himself sprawled out on a wooden floor in the middle of a large and nearly vacant room. Gazing upward, he was surprised to find a midnight sky with about 1,000,000 twinkling stars glittering overhead. Blinking several times to clear his eyes of the strange dizziness that overwhelmed him, he discovered that the space was utterly unfamiliar to him. Jack? Jack, are you all right, my boy? He turned toward the voice and for a moment had no recollection of who this man was. As he pushed himself up, holding a hand to his throbbing head, it came back to him. The stranger who magically appeared in his room. The man was leaning over him now, touching his shoulder. Jack? Yes, I do believe you'll be fine. It can be quite disconcerting the first time, I know. Arthur dragged a chair close to where Jack was sitting on the floor and sat on it. Do you need a moment to steady yourself? He asked. Jack groaned as another dull ache boomed through his skull. Yeah, so that was weird. Where are we? He took the hat off his head and began turning it this way and that. He noticed a discreet black button on the underside of the brim and reached to touch it when... Oh, you don't want to do that, Master Jack. I'll take the hat now, if you don't mind. Arthur reached out his hand, gesturing for Jack to pass it to him. I'd like to keep the photo, if it's all right, Jack said, relinquishing the cap to the butler. Of course you can have it. Arthur reached inside the brown and green newsboy and carefully unpinned the image from inside, then handed it back to Jack. Where are we? Jack asked again, looking at the room around him. It was a strange place. Just a couple of rolling chairs and a giant globe in the center of the room. "This is your ancestral home, Jack," Arthur replied. "Its name is Macpayden Manor. Your grandfather, Sir Edward Macpayden, inherited it from his father, and he from his father before him, and on back in time for more than a century. Your father, Ross, would have inherited this mansion if he had not been tragically killed in that car accident. But someday, when you children are older, one of you will become master of this magnificent home." Arthur finished and looked at Jack, who was now standing off the floor and wandering around the room. "Where is he?" "My grandfather." "Can we go see him now?" Jack asked as he approached the staircase on the far side of the room. There was no response from behind him, so Jack turned around to see the butler staring at a blank corner of the room, a sad look in his eye. He ran his fingers through the sparse, sandy hair on the top of his head, then looked back at Jack. "That's a complicated topic to talk about, Master Jack," he said. "Come, sit back down. I need to tell you something." Jack didn't move. "What?" "You said my grandfather sent you to get me. So where is he?" "Well, the thing is," Arthur paused and took a deep breath. "You see, Master Jack, your grandfather is presumed dead." Jack stood speechless, staring at the man in the gray-brown suit. "I don't understand," was all he could think to say. Arthur sighed. "Please, come sit down. I'll try to explain." He got up and pulled another chair over next to the one he had been sitting on. Jack walked slowly back from the staircase and sat down next to Arthur. "You see, the last time I saw your grandfather was 2 years ago, when your Aunt Inez materialized into this very room. She and 4 of her thugs entered through a portal of some kind, and they violently forced Sir Edward out through that portal with them. She made it clear that she intended to kill him." "Why would she want to do that? He was her dad, wasn't he?" "Yes, but she had threatened his life before. I'll tell you all about it another time. For now, just know that a week after they all disappeared through that portal, I received a plain, unmarked envelope in the post containing his reading glasses. He had them custom engraved with his initials on them, so I know they were his. And I haven't heard from him since, so I have reason to believe—" Arthur coughed, his voice becoming constricted. "He is gone." Jack stood in silence, not sure how to respond. He had learned of his grandpa's existence and his death all in the same day. "Well, then, why am I here?" he asked. "I mean, why did you even bother to go get me if Grandpa is dead?" "Honestly, lad, that's a very good question," Arthur said. "I guess I don't have a good answer for that myself." He paused and looked at Jack. "I guess when I saw your light blinking on that globe over there, I just reacted. I did what I knew my master intended me to do when that dot lit up. I grabbed your hat, the one he made specifically for you, and dashed off without thinking much about it." His gaze drifted to the 2 hats in his hand. "We're quite the pair, you and I, aren't we, Master Jack? Me, without a sense of purpose since my master went missing, and you, stuck in a precarious living situation with danger at your doorstep." Jack rubbed his nose with the back of his sleeve. "Yeah, I guess so," he said. "I mean, I'm glad you got me out of there because, honestly, I was scared and didn't know what I was going to do. But now that I'm here, what now? He looked around the room, spying a window out of which he could see a dark sky. The same sky that he was used to looking at, but from an entirely different location. Well, it probably doesn't help you much to know that I was a little scared myself when I appeared in your room. After the experience I had with your older brother, I didn't know what kind of a reaction to expect from you. Jack's eyes shot back to Arthur's. My brother? You've seen Ethan? Oh, yes, Arthur began, matter-of-factly. Of course. As the oldest child, Ethan's powers manifested themselves a couple of years before yours did. Then he stopped, observing Jack's reaction to what he said. You haven't seen Ethan or Sadie since your parents passed, have you, Master Jack? Jack's eyes fell to the cold wooden floor. He shook his head. He missed his brother and sister just as much as he missed his parents. And I'm going to stop right there for now because there's still a bit of this chapter left to read, and I don't want to run out of time in my video. So we will pick up and read the rest of chapter 22. I think it's 22. Next time. And then we'll go on to read chapter 23, Grandma Lydia. So I'm going to mark this page, and I will continue reading this next time, which will be on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you've enjoyed this reading from The Golden Telescope. If you have, please do take a moment to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and be sure to ding that little bell so that you receive notifications every time I upload new content, which I do 3 times a week, usually Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Again, have a great weekend. This is Tracy signing off. Take good care.